everyone, PushingUpRoses here. Today I'm going to be taking a look at A Mortician's Tale and its role in the death-positive movement. There's a lot to unload here, especially if you're not familiar with the movement, but that's why A Mortician's Tale is unique and a great starting point for people who are curious. I'd like to start out by talking about the movement itself so you can understand the game and where it's coming from. There have been death-positive people in the world for a long time, and we've definitely had media that explores death in different ways: movies, art, literature, and even video games. This is a universal topic that every culture has some connection to, and due to its nebulous nature, death has been something people take pleasure in analyzing. The main character in A Mortician's Tale, named Charlie, is almost directly based on Caitlin Doty, a mortician and death-positive advocate. In fact, she was really the one who coined the term death-positive and managed to bring her advocacy to the mainstream. Caitlin and her colleagues, who make up the Order of the Good Death, travel the world and speak in order to teach people how to be more comfortable with their mortality and bring to light practices in the funeral industry that can help people make decisions about what happens to their bodies and the bodies of their loved ones after death. So death positivity is not about, sweet, death and dying, I just can't wait to die, oh happy day, or yay, Uncle Mark finally bit the dust, woohoo, bust out the amaretto. It's about being comfortable with your mortality and erasing the taboo surrounding discussion about death and dying. And if you haven't looked at Caitlin's channel, Ask a Mortician, I highly recommend it. So now you have the foundation for A Mortician's Tale. Your character works at a mom-and-pop funeral home that offers fair prices and works with the families to give them the best experience they can have after a loved one has died. Charlie, the main character, even looks like Caitlin with that classic dark hair and Betty Bang. I hesitate to call this a full-on game because while it is something you play, I find it more similar to a visual novel. I don't mind referring to it as either because this is something gamers will be interested in, so I think it should be categorized alongside other games, possibly in the visual novel subgenre. I think this borders on edutainment, really, because it was made to teach, and while it's not along the same lines as teaching someone a different language, or math, or reading comprehension, I guarantee you will walk away from this with new knowledge on a topic that perhaps you've not given much thought to. During the short time you play this, you read emails from families, attend people's funeral, and are exposed to the different ways people grieve. And you also learn about the industry and how it can be really dishonest and even money-grubbing. Even though the interactions are really brief, some of it really resonated with me as I lost my dad when I was a young teenager, and I still remember his open casket funeral and the different ways people took his death. It's not necessarily sad or dark, but it can be poignant. If anything, A Mortician's Tale quells that dark feeling that can sometimes come along with death and grief, and puts it in a light where you can learn something from it. I especially like that you can read a funeral newsletter that Charlie is subscribed to that gives people helpful and realistic tips on helping people who are grieving, and it also has some very interesting facts about other cultures and how they prepare their corpses. Eventually, the home Charlie works for gets bought out by a large corporation who is less concerned about providing a comforting experience to their clients and more eager to sell funeral packages, upselling and convincing people to pay extra money for things that families aren't aware they can say no to. This is what makes A Mortician's Tale stand out among other visual novels. These are things your average person just doesn't think about. I've had death in my family, my close family even, and I didn't know embalming wasn't required. I didn't even know that some funeral directors were so hungry for money because when someone dies, you just assume that everyone is going to treat you respectfully as you're grieving. But apparently it's not always like that, and instead of providing comfort, some funeral homes will just prey on your vulnerable state of mind. And even though we've had other interactive media explore death in more fictional ways, I've never seen something directly based on the death-positive movement or wanting to teach the player about the funeral industry. That is very new to me, and it's hard to stay fresh in a medium that's saturated with a lot of the same ideas. And just on a personal level, though this might not be the death-positive movement's intent, I think it can also help those with a broken relationship with death, even those who are mentally ill and considering death as an option, because the movement isn't really about death, is it? I find it's more about living and learning, not being afraid to have these candid discussions about your fears and interests, and doing things in your life today that makes death easier for you. I used to think I was comfortable with death, but I realized my comfort wasn't actually comfort at all. I'm a suicide survivor. I've lived through multiple overdoses because I sought out death. Not because I was comfortable with my mortality. I was seeking out death because that was my exit. I still suffer with suicide ideation sometimes, and I find that reading articles and watching videos about death helps me to manage those and look at things through a more rational lens. And yeah, some people might think, ugh, that's morbid and unhealthy. But I think learning that there can be a good death, something that you're prepared for, something that you've lived a full life for, and have accepted your inevitable demise is crucial for people like me. I don't want a bad death. I don't want myself to come to tragic means by my own hand. I want to live and have that life be full of good things. There is definitely an emphasis on life in this movement because it's what you do in the living that makes this movement count. At least that is my personal perspective on it. So it's important that media like A Mortician's Tale exists because it's going to appeal to a brand new community. I think the more people you can appeal to, the better, whether that be gamers, non-gamers, people fearful of death, people not fearful of death. It's a topic that can be beneficial to you no matter what your interests are. I've been in the gaming community for years, and I have not seen much overlap between that and the death-positive community, but it's way more likely now. That being all said, I do want to touch on a few more things specifically about the game and not necessarily about the message, which I've said is fantastic. This is a short experience. I finished my playthrough in about 50 minutes, and it's also very linear. One of the main criticisms is that it feels too much like a short tutorial. My genuine opinion from a product standpoint is that there isn't enough substance to warrant the current price. But that is strictly subjective. Some people are going to really connect with this experience and they won't mind paying a little more to get that feeling. It really depends on the person. For example, I sell my paintings for between $60 and $100, and you can't even play those, they just sit there. But some people think they're worth having because they find my art unique or meaningful. So even though I honestly think the price could be reduced, I don't necessarily want to deter people from playing it because much like how my clients view my art, I view this game as a unique and meaningful experience, and I personally was happy to support it. Again, it's up to you, your mileage may vary, but if somebody walks away from this with a better feeling about death and grieving, then it was worth it. There are a few points during my playthrough where I did feel things getting redundant. For example, when you're preparing bodies, you can't mess up, and there will always be instructions at the top of the screen telling you what the next step is. Did I think it might be cool to not have the instructions later in the game? Yeah, I thought that could work, but I had to remind myself that that's not the point of this story. If you want a game that tests you on the process of surgery and medical things, then try Life and Death. That game is about the method, and you can screw up badly. A Mortician's Tale is narrative-driven, so whether you can or can't mess up is not important. It would have been nice to be like, okay, I shaved the corpse and I gotta guess the next step, but that would make this a different experience. All of that being said, I think this is a positive, educational, and relaxing experience that some people will really connect with, and I'm glad it exists. Though, like many others, I do wish the story was a tad bit longer. If you have the means and you're interested in this kind of story and message, then I hope you'll give it a shot, and if not, there are a lot of other resources about the death-positive community that I will link in the description below. What is your relationship with death? Do you find it scary or weird to talk about? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know what other games and interactive media have an emphasis on death. I'm open to media that addresses subjects like this, and the more we discuss it in an open and honest way, the less stigma there will be. Hey everyone, thanks for watching my video on A Mortician's Tale. I hope you'll consider playing through it someday. If you're interested in more game reviews, I have a few linked on the screen, or you can tweet me photos of skulls on my social media pages, because one can never have too many skulls.